All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order here at 8:03 a.m. Appreciate our guests today. And so we'll start with that, the town administrator report on the FY27 revenue and expense forecast. And you're gonna screen share.
Sure.
Present?
If you could give me-
I'm sorry.
Great. Well, good morning. Thank you for having us. I have a few slides here, not a ton, but we'll just kind of talk through where things stand in our process. Some preliminary looks at the numbers, and what we're thinking about for fiscal 27. Obviously, just feel free to drop a question if there's anything to make this too formal. But first, so I will run through where we're at with fiscal 25, and then we'll talk about 27 a little bit. So fiscal 25 ended June 30th, on the revenue side, and this is something we talked about with a few different groups and select board as well, but we're about $3.7 million in excess of our budget on revenue forecast. I've identified some of the larger items within our revenues that were kind of outliers. And I flag these because most of them we consider to be kind of one-time collections for various reasons, tax liens and penalties and interest, for example. We've seen a lot of progress from the treasurer and collector's office in closing out some longer term outstanding accounts that have not been up to date by keeping pressure up on taxpayers who are delinquent for multiple years. So as those come in, obviously that's a one-time collection, and going forward, we expect to collect their taxes on a regular basis. Motor vehicle excise tax, we've been conservative on that. Year over year, we're seeing increasing valuations as anybody who had tried to buy a car in the last few years. So that might be something where there is more of a new baseline, but that was about $900,000 over our budget expectation. Trash fees, we had a $1 increase on the trash fees in effect for fiscal 25. So we were conservative in terms of forecasting what that might look like, just because we weren't sure what that impact would be in terms of our people maybe choose a different option, maybe change how they use the carts. But kind of normal service continued despite the $1 fee increase, and that fee increase is now in place again, obviously for fiscal 26. Building permits, that department has stayed extremely busy, which is good. The addition renovation experiences that we've been having have stayed high. What is a little unique about fiscal 25 is we had a number of projects start between several 40Bs all got building permits that year, so they had large permit payments in fiscal 25. So far this year, we've permitted or are about to issue a permit for 582 Louisville Ave 40B, which is 84 unit building. But otherwise, we're not seeing necessarily any of the large projects. There are a couple of larger projects still to come, but they might not necessarily get their building permit in fiscal 26, maybe in fiscal 27, depending on the timeline. Lastly, investment income. We should just start renaming this, but it is more interest income than investment. Just the earnings on our dollars in banks and elsewhere. So again, high interest rate environment, large amount of savings on the books, which helps drive that number high. This number has been as low as $50,000, even if you go back 4 or 5 years. So it's one of those that really does fluctuate, and we've adjusted our expectations for that a little bit, but we do want to be cautious because that, the interest rate environment could change. It's starting to shift downwards. So it's hard to view that in terms of a year-to-year basis, but we take those revenues, we add our expenditures, and we had about $1 million in unspent funds across various town departments. We call them together, mostly the vacancies with turnover and underspending in terms of needs of some of our town departments, which we appreciate from departments not spending their dollars just to spend them. And lastly, free cash was certified as we shared earlier this week, last week. I don't, if there's anything Amy, I should add in terms of 25s.
I don't think so. It's just the audit's pretty much wrapped up. They're just waiting for some information on the retirement system. But other than that, that went well. And moving on to 26 and figuring out 27.
Start talking about 7 a little bit. So just keeping with the theme on the revenue side of the aisle, for fiscal 27, our preliminary forecast makes some baseline assumptions, as you can see on the screen. We assume we're increasing property taxes to the maximum of our ability under Proposition 2.5. For new growth, our forecast assumes $1 million a year. That's in our 5-year forecast as well. Our new growth value for fiscal 26 has been preliminary approved by the Department of Revenue. It's well above $1 million as we've been the last several years, but we're in accordance to some of the conversations we've had with the state, an outlier on that. And that is driven by a few different pieces. Obviously, new construction helps, additions and renovations, those have been high and remain high. We have a couple of large projects, which is good, and those contribute. The fiscal 26 new growth number includes, for example, the Ice House 40B project fully coming online and starting to sell units. So we captured a ton of growth related to this, just that project alone. The other key element here is about a third of our new growth, maybe a quarter, is utilities. National Grid has been doing a ton of work in Milton. Eversource continues to replace lines. So if that work were to slow down, we would see our new growth numbers slow down too. So while we feel comfortable here today with new growth at $1 million for fiscal 27, it's a place where we might have to revise our projection downwards, just as there are broader, potentially macroeconomic issues that might affect that. If some of our larger projects process through and we capture that growth, and there is an additional project behind that, we might not have that kind of baseline target. But for now, we're at $1 million for fiscal 27. State aid, we've tried to stay conservative on state aid. So this is, we've just plugged $132,000 increase in chapter 70. It comes out to about $30 a pupil at 4,400 students, which it's a placeholder. It's a modest increase. I think it's around 1%. I remember right. So we're not trying to get out ahead of our skis on that. And then unrestricted general government aid is a 2% increase of $82,000. So hopefully our state aid numbers and the governor's budget when it comes out in January will be above that. But that's where we left it for now. Local receipts, we just talked about local receipts a lot. Like we are very conservative on those forecasts. We maintain that. So we're expecting about a 1% increase in fiscal 20 forecast at this time. That's about $120,000, I think. And right now we don't assume any use of cash into the budget. The bottom line is you put that together, that's about $4.2 million or 2.9% increase from our fiscal 26 expected revenues. And that doesn't include any use of the operating budget stabilization fund that was included in the override, $700,000. And then town meeting also approved $2 million going into that fund in May. So there's no withdrawal right now contemplated in these numbers here.
Nick, how do utilities relate to growth? Is that like a fees or something?
So it's personal property, and a lot of our commercial value here in town is actually utilities rather than commercial buildings and infrastructure. So it's pipelines, it's poles, it's conduit, it's wires. So it's a taxable asset. The valuation is set by the state. So it's really just how many miles of X, Y, and Z do you have, and then there's a calculation that the Department of Revenue sets that you tax the utilities. So it depreciates very quickly. However, it's helpful in capturing growth when the utilities are doing a lot of work, whether it's new poles, whether it's running new conduit, and really for national grid, it's the amount of pipeline work they've been doing to chase gas. So that's on credit. Correct. Like if Plymouth and Grafton a lot of gas main replacement, gas service replacement going on for the last year. So that's just all the lines that we then tax as.
A 1% increase on local receipts that you're assuming, like, is there a simple way to explain what that would look like relative to the previous slide? Like, sort of how much additional revenue came in? You're not, in other words, like, you're not really adjusting your assumptions even with the additional.
No, because I think that's where we're spending some time to try to feel more certain about what we view as one time. Is that motor vehicle excise an outlier, or should we assume that that is more like a baseline forward? Some of the other items we can attribute to one-time occurrences. So it's just making sure we're not too dependent on when that actually show up in future years.
Nick, given, thank you, and given what 25 yielded as a positive, free cash outlook, as well as revenue being 3 million higher, et cetera. What is your expectation for FY 26? How do we build, how do we do you think we'll end in the same spot at the end of 26 as we did in 25 as a potential assumption, or? No, that's a big question.
No, it's a good question. I think it's a little early. The large motor vehicle excise tax commitment is in January. Right? January, February. So like there's different times through the year where we'll have better information about where we expect to land.
I think the treasurer is continuing the efforts to collect on some of the older stuff, so you might see some of the tax liens redeemed and the penalties of interest still be higher than we've historically had. But at some time that's gonna peak because she's cleaning out old stuff, right? So it's really hard to say because we're only a few months into the year, and it's not like these income streams are all like flat, right? Like there's peaks and valleys different times of the year that they come in. Like the trash fees are billed out in July timeframe, so we should have a good read on the barrel fees anyways. And then there's like the individual stickers that are sold. So I think it's a little early to tell. And I think the investment income still, we haven't seen an impact from any decrease in rates yet. It's all how she's managing the money too.
Thank you.
I think where we sit today, we feel good about hitting our budget. It's the question of how far above the budget, and as the months go by, we'll have a better sense of that. Trash fees in particular are on track, and based on the first 3 months of collections, we're at or above where we were last year. So some of the other items are more about, especially on the building permits front, you know, the trend is still where it was. It's more about how many large building permit fees we can get. We know of one. You know, Winter Valley has a project coming up that might have a large fee that they get a building permit for. So that's more boom and bust, but depending on the types of projects. But we'll continue to monitor and continue to provide updates.
Yes, so the interest income or the investment. Isn't that a little bit, I mean, I know the rates will vary, but. Basically a little bit more. From planning out, I mean, because it's pretty significantly over. Is that something that you can?
I think if you go back 3 or 4 years, we were below $100,000. So it's like, that's how variable it can be. Now, look, the treasurer is trying to do everything she can to take advantage to manage the money. I think, I don't want to say aggressively, but I think smartly, yes. I think, because it's not investments. It's not like we're playing in the market. But it's just managing cash flow, keeping an eye on cash flow, to take advantage of the savings on the books to accrue money. So I would be reticent to make significant adjustments. We've revised that projection upwards over the past several years. I would be reluctant to move it much more. Like, we can feel comfortable about fiscal 26 that we're gonna be on target. But what is the market gonna look like here? Like, that's really the question that we're trying to forecast. And that's what gets a little bit more challenging.
And just keep in mind, like, the revenue in excess of budget of 3.7. It's a lot of money, but as a percentage of our total budget, it really isn't. So that could easily swing
Yeah.
the opposite way if we're too aggressive on our revenue forecast. So we just have to remain to be conservative, keep an eye on it, but it's really not that large of a percentage. So
What is total revenue?
Pardon?
What is total revenue?
It's over 100 million.
Property tax levy is about 110 million total. The general fund operating budget is about 145 million.
Yeah,
So 3% less than.
Obviously, there's some advantages of having free cash in terms of like using them for capital improvements. One time costs. Is there a target you'll generally like try and get to with like free cash amount? We've obviously had much higher, as y'all said, than we've been doing in the past few years of like over 4 million. I think last year was the first time we were ever over 4 million from prior like graphs y'all shared with us previously. And so like that's great in terms of what we can invest that funds in, but do y'all have a general target of what you?
So my answer
Yeah.
might be different than Nick's answer, but just the way we budget.
Yeah.
We budget to a zero surplus, so the way we budget overall, we're not budgeting to generate free cash, right? We're appropriating whatever our revenue estimates are. But we are working on policies
So
that would
one
address that.
of the discussion items we've been having internally and then talked about with the finance committee yesterday was a lot of cities and towns have policies that set a goal for free cash generation each year. And so that it's helpful because then it requires that you keep conservative revenue forecasting project as kind of a foundational requirement of that. So we're talking about internally whether it makes sense to kind of start having a target about that so that we feel comfortable holding the line on revenue forecasts, because now we have a policy that says our expectation is that we're going to generate at least 2 to 4% of the budget, or 1 to 3% of the budget, whatever that kind of goal is. But right now, we don't really have a metric for it, other than just trying to stay conservative on the revenue forecasting. $1 million of this is unspent funds. We appreciate every unspent dollar that our parents don't spend, but we can't expect that. If we're fully staffed across all the departments, then that number would be drastically lower. So we don't want to be in a world where we're having departments not spend appropriations in order to hit policy targets. Like, that's the other side of it, which is so we're wrestling with that.
And the other half of that is, what is the target of free cash you'd like to have in whatever revolving account you would put it in? And when that's enough, would you scale that expectation back? Because we're not a money-making organization as a town, right? We're supposed to expend the funds on services for community, but I just say, I appreciate the conservative revenue estimates. And I would much rather be sitting here looking at a sheet like this that says we had a look at this is a one-time thing, because all those numbers will change for FY 26, up or down, you know what I mean? They'll change again in 27. So being conservative, I think, is always the best thing, for sure.
And so for those communities that have a policy around how much free cash they're looking to have, do they also have policies saying what they're gonna do with the free cash? Because I mean, I think, like, you're not just building up free cash just to have a bunch of money at the end of the year, right? So I'm just curious, like, are they using it because they're saying, okay, we're gonna do this with like our capital
Correct.
improvement budgets?
Yeah, so generally it ties to appropriate uses of it as well.
Right,
And then the other element is some communities don't appropriate all of it. So they might leave $1 million unappropriated free cash after their town meeting. So they're already starting next year knowing regardless of what happens with the budget, we expect to hopefully have at least $1 million in that scenario that DOR is going to certify as a baseline. So it speaks to a more kind of holistic approach on it. Our draft policy right now doesn't get into like how explicitly free cash will be used, rather it says it won't be used for recurring operating budgets, and sets that as a new requirement, but leaves kind of the annual appropriations a little bit flexible rather than saying 10% will go to general stabilization, 10% will go to capital stabilization, 10% will go here. Like, it doesn't get into that kind of details in terms of the draft.
So I understand, Nick, you said that there is currently on the books guidance to not use free cash for operating.
That's our draft policy that we've been working on, explicitly says it shall not be used for.
How do you feel about that as a person who needs to architect the budget? Would that be a challenge for your team?
Was that, I'm sorry, for.
Yeah, for the team,
Yeah.
and when that's a lever that people always like to take out if they need to take it out, I guess is what I'm saying. Is that what
Yeah,
hard
I
for you
think
guys?
that, best practices are you don't use free
Right.
cash for operations. So over the last several years with COVID and different kinds of things, we went off course with that, but to stick to best practices, yeah, it'll always be a challenge in Milton because our we're revenue restricted, right?
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
if we have some large increases in uncontrollable expenses, it'll definitely be challenging, but it's a good best business practice to try to stick to, so that we don't end up in a situation with like another extremely high override.
agreed.
In the additional kind of context and wrinkle I'll add to that is with the new operating budget stabilization fund that was set up deliberately to support the budget in the next few years, that would be the source we would turn to support budgets rather than turning to free cash.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, makes sense.
it is as well, to an extent, partially one-time money going into the budget, but we set it up explicitly to do that, to draw from it over the next 4 to 5 years to support budgets ahead of any next one. So rather than go to free cash to do that, I think our approach will be in years where we have high free cash, is there an opportunity to appropriate additional money into that operating budget stabilization fund for use in fiscal 30, right? Rather than directly into fiscal 27, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and that's kind of, I think. That's kind of where it's more intentional in the mechanism, right? Of saying like, instead of just taking from free cash, the free cash is going to be put in those specific buckets, and those are the buckets that that would be used to fund operations.
On the expense side, these numbers here are, I'll just add, in terms of how we've approached the forecast, we didn't approach it from a perspective of what do we expect costs to be, and let's plug those in. We approach it from the inverse of saying, what revenue can we count on? And with that revenue calculated, what can our budgets support? Or what can our revenue support for budgets? So that is where these numbers come from. So I just want to be clear on that. It's not that we expect salaries only to grow by 2%. It's more that if salaries go by 2.5% and all these other conditions are met, the way we mapped out the forecast, the budget should be able to balance with the utilization of the operating budget stabilization fund. So that's kind of the overall framework of these numbers. What can our revenue support? Not necessarily what are our expenses. So for 27, as an example, these are kind of the baseline numbers that we have plugged as placeholders. 2.5% of salaries, 3% of general expenses across all departments. Health insurance, I'll come back to. General insurance, an 8% increase. Our assessments on the cherry sheets at 2%. Our debt service, which is in accordance with our debt schedule. I didn't get too much into detail on that, but that contemplates a significant increase in debt service over 27 and 28. already rolled in to support the capital projects previously approved. So it's going up like $500,000 in 27, and another $500,000 in 28, and then there are forecasts from there. And that's already built into the forecast. OPEB, so we have an OPEB policy for contributions to the other post-employment benefits trust, primarily retiree health insurance. That's increasing at approximately 2.5% a year. Milton retirement, we're fully funded. Actually, we're in excess of full funding for about 102%, 102% funded in the retirement system, one of the only communities fully funded in Massachusetts. So what we're doing with retirement right now is we're paying what's called the normal cost, which is expectation of future benefit for current employees are going in to maintain full funding. In addition to that, we're contributing an additional $1 million to retirement to continue to build up those reserves, so we don't experience any kind of all of a sudden come out of full funding if the market were to drop. OPEB and retirement together, under our policy, $2.5 million will go to those two and grow 2.5% a year. So Milton retirement had $0 additional dollars going. The entire balance of what we set aside for OPEB retirement will go to OPEB. If Milton retirement crashes out of full funding and needs $2.5 million a year, it has that available within the budget already. So it's $2.5 million set aside for these long-term liabilities growing 2.5% a year. And the split between those two may vary year to year, but that overall commitment is expected to remain going forward.
If I can just add, Milton retirement, the funding schedule is set by the Milton Retirement Board. So that is outside of management's control.
Congratulations, that's a big deal. Yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah, it was, a deliberate choice of prior boards and prior retirement boards and prior warrant committees to stay on track, to keep to that. So it's a nice accomplishment. And I'll just note, our payments to the retirement system a couple of years ago to get to full funding were in excess of $4 to $5 million. So when we hit full funding, we held on to $2.5 million of that, but the balance flowed to the rest of the budget as savings to be used by operating budgets. And those were consumed by operating budgets over the year. So we have savings on those long-term liabilities that have already been absorbed elsewhere in the budget. And we're safeguarding that $2.5 million to keep making progress. I don't mean to get too detailed on it, but the other thing is at our ratings call with S&P this year, they were very focused, more so they've been in the past couple of years on OPEB. So to have a policy and to be adhering to it is going a long way in their eyes. And there was a focus on the call as well as in their report that they provided publicly afterwards.
Which we maintained our AAA rating.
Did
I steal your thunder?
Oh, thank you. Lastly, utilities. So utilities are captured within the general expense. I just call it out specifically because there's been a lot of public attention to electricity costs, nationally, locally. The good news is that our electricity supply contract, which is up in December 26th, we're able to renew that for a further 3 years, and our supply cost is going down. So right now we're paying 13.7 cents a kilowatt hour. After December of 2026, we'll be paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour for 3 years. So that's a locked in rate, which is solid. We were expecting much more pessimistic news, just if you read everything that's going on with electricity costs and you're looking at your own utility bill. That said, that's only half of what we pay, supply and distribution on the electricity side. So we're going to see savings about $50,000 across all of our electricity accounts on utilities. However, our broker fully expects that those savings are going to be not by increased charges from other sources on the distribution sides of the bill. So for utilities, we should not be budgeting any reductions in 27, unfortunately. At least keep them flat, if not a slight increase to acknowledge and recognize that potential increase on the bill. So some good news, some not good news. On gas, so again, gas is also up November of 26th. Right now, the recommendation on the energy markets is to actually not enter into the long-term contracts, but to go back to the utility for this winter. And not this winter, next winter, and let's see where the market goes. A lot could change between now and then, but right now, we're not in a position to extend that contract. They think that for fiscal 27, gas supply costs should be flat. But again, the utility, National Grid in this case, has been increasing its delivery charges, so those are expected to grow 5 to 7%. And roughly, that's half the bill, half is supply, half is delivery. Not necessarily exactly, but that's just where utilities are. And I just wanted to kind of draw that out a little bit because of the kind of public attention electricity costs are getting. So stable is good, or not quite stable, but we're not also experiencing massive increases. So we have a bit of good news on that front. Yeah, so health insurance. I ducked the hard one. So I'm just gonna go into the health insurance in a little bit more detail here and then I'll come back. So this is, we had a 14% premium increase for fiscal 26. In addition to our challenges on health insurance as we were building the 26 budget was the high premium increase, but also much higher enrollment numbers than we had seen. So the fiscal 26 budget resets our enrollment forecast to where we are. So I think the number is, we expect 712 subscribers. We're at that now. So we're remaining kind of on target in terms of overall enrollment. This year, just one kind of trend we're noticing is a lot more employees moving over with open enrollment into family plans rather than individual plans. So in July, when the new after open enrollment, we saw a significant increase in family plans, which are much more expensive than individual plans. So our overall enrollment remains on target. We're monitoring that on a monthly basis, but we'll have to keep an eye on that throughout fiscal 26 as we approach fiscal 27. The premium front, we've had good experience on premiums the last 4 or 5 years. That changed with fiscal 26, a 14% increase. And the news on this is that we should expect similar for fiscal 27. The Mass Municipal Association has been extremely focused on this over the last couple of months. I've linked a couple of things here. The executive director wrote a report, an article about it that he shared widely. 2 weeks ago, they had a forum in Rentham that I attended on healthcare costs. The director of the GIC was there, a representative from Blue Cross, and the director of the Maya Health Trust as well. And they're all expecting premium increases and costs to continue. I pulled a couple of takeaways from this, which is that one of the interesting components of the presentation was that utilization had been pretty flat, but it's just the costs that have gone up. And then in 24 and 25, utilization also started to increase. So utilization and cost are increasing, which is a double-headed storm for us. GIC had a 12% premium increase last year. Milton again was at 14. And that they're just seeing that, through COVID and the first couple of years out of it, trends were at a 4 to 6% premium increases, and that shot up across the board. Something we're going to have to continue to monitor. Our forecast assumed 7% year on health insurance per year, which is well above what our recent trends have been. So we felt pretty comfortable with that as somewhat conservative, but we may be wrong for fiscal 27, unfortunately. We'll have to keep an eye on it further. So just for more context with self-insured, so we a contract with Blue Cross and Hubbard Pilgrim, we pay premium into a trust, then we pay claims out of that trust. So as claims increase and costs increase, it puts pressure on the trust, which returns to us in raising our premiums. The worst case scenario would be that costs so fast outpace our premiums and collections that the trust is imperiled and maybe not solvent. So like that's the worst case scenario. By doing the 14% premium increase, we expect to get through 26 without those challenges, but because we're self-insured, the risk in terms of losing it, having the trust be insolvent remains with the town. And we have stop loss insurance. So like for individual high claims costs. We pay the first $175,000 for a claim. After that, the stop loss will kick in. So we'll continue to pay that claim, but we'll get reimbursed at the end. So that's just broadly how it works.
How much is in the trust name?
I think it's, don't quote me, I think it's somewhere around maybe 4 million. They recommend what, like 3 times?
Your monthly claims.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Thank you.
In this environment, is the stop loss insurance like also?
We experienced like a 10% increase on our stop loss insurance. That's about $1 million last year. So that has gone. So we've seen that increase. And in addition, what they will sometimes do is identify claims and say, these claims we expect to be very expensive. So Milton, for these particular claims, the stop loss number will be higher. So there are a couple of claims where it's not $175,000, but it's like 330, 360,000. So we own for those particular claims, we own first several $100,000s on them, and then the stop loss will step in. So that's a way they shift their costs back to us
Negotiate case by case on those.
through the annual procurement. That was one of the discussions. So just as an example, I shared what our plan costs are. So the most popular plan is the Blue Cross Family Plan. Total cost is $35,000 a year. We pay 76%, the 26,600, and then the employee shares 8,400. And you can see where the trend is more family plans, obviously that is drastically more expensive. And just to put it in overall context, for fiscal 27, every 1% on the premium is about $125,000 increase to our health insurance budget. So 27's preliminary forecast included 70% premium increase against the entire health insurance budget. So it's a little bit more than a 7% premium increase, but that's kind of the ballpark. Anything above that, we didn't really contemplate and would have an impact on the total budget. There are things the town can do to shift costs through plan design changes. There's state law that allows the town to implement plan design changes through if you follow a certain process and meet the unions to discuss it. So that's one potential pathway, but it doesn't mean our costs will be less. It just means that, I mean, the town's cost might be less, but it's a shifting of the cost rather than what the cost. So just to be clear about how that works. So it'd be likely, if that were to happen, it would be looking at co-pays and deductibles primarily and finding ways to increase those. The town is able to enact plan design changes to match the most popular GIC plan. So it's not like we can go to some high deductible plan only. But we would have to match whatever the most popular GIC plan is, which is a little bit higher co-pays and a little bit higher deductible than our plan currently has.
Can you go to a high deductible plan with a reimbursement account attached to it? So that
We-
employees see the same net.
The town in theory could offer such a plan. We couldn't replace our plans with that. So the highest deductible in town, right now it's $400 individual, 800 family. The most popular GIC plan is 500 individual, 1,000 family. So that's the extent that we can go to. The GIC has more options. We have only 2 plans and they're pretty much the same. Harvard Pilgrim and Blue Cross, they're almost mirrors of each other. The GIC has more options, so it has high deductible plans if the employees choose that option. They're not required to, of course, but they can.
Don't we have to offer a high deductible plan for the, I don't know, the fact that you're at 76%, but like there's a state requirement around affordability, like being able to offer a plan that's sort of cost maxed out for employers, that kind of thing.
We're required to offer a PPO plan, which we do, which is not on here, but that is a more expensive plan. It's not always. Beyond that, we're not required. We have no.
Yeah, there's one other thing on health, because I know this is GLP-1s, is that something that like those? Okay.
Yeah, no, it was a huge discussion item at that forum.
Yeah.
I'm going to Norfolk County has a town managers group and we're meeting today. And somebody put that on the agenda to talk about. Right now, they're covered under our plans. Blue Cross is phasing out coverage entirely. Harvard Pilgrim, I believe their plan is you can take the option, the only one they'll cover is they're gonna limit it to one. I forget which. They're talking like that was like 2 to 3% of our premium increase was just the coverage of the GLP-1s. So we're following kind of how other insurers and other cities and towns are gonna price it.
What are GLP-1?
Oh, sorry, it's like the
Ozempic.
the diabetes based on drugs and stuff like that.
That's raising the level of it being a municipal budget challenge.
There's that
It's huge,
expensive,
yeah, 2-3% of your insurance.
When that many people start.
I think Blue Cross is not fully eliminated just for weight loss.
Yeah.
From that.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, for weight loss coverage. They will offer it if we have a rider to our plan, which sets out what the coverage requirements are. It's been a huge cost item, hopefully with, the insurers setting more limits in terms of what they'll cover, then the providers and the pharmaceuticals will find ways to reduce their costs to try to keep it covered. I think that's kind of the bigger picture market battle that we're seeing play out on a kind of town by town level. I don't know what our approach will be, but it's been a significant cost driver. I don't want to talk about these as just the costs because we don't talk about cancer drugs that way. So it's hard to talk about one particular treatment. And I thought the director of the GIC at that forum put it well. He said, this is a very successful proven treatment for a chronic health issue. So we have to approach these very carefully in how we're going to approach them and cover them. So we're monitoring what the GIC does and what the Maya Benefits Trust, which has a number of cities and towns in it, will do throughout the year. But it has been a huge cost factor. Nobody's really talking about what have the savings been. Like we must be avoiding costs as well. If folks are avoiding becoming diabetic, if they're improving cardiovascular health. So it's kind of nebulous issue.
Yeah, the
Right.
challenge is you're
Yeah.
avoiding costs that haven't happened yet.
Exactly.
They're coming in 10 years.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's a tough one. It is expensive. It's very expensive. There's no doubt about that. But the other elements of it are kind of too big right now. So yeah, I wanted to focus on health insurance because it's a huge part of our budget. It is the biggest concern we have right now about fiscal 27 will be how health insurance shakes out. But anyway, so for just the overall takeaways, the kind of broader macro forecast stuff, obviously hard to impact right now. Everything appears stable. Hopefully that continues. We talked a lot about receipts that they're trying to do above budget, but it doesn't necessarily mean all those are recurring operating budget or operating revenues that we can depend on. We talked a little bit about the operating fund and how we're going to have to draw that down carefully over the next several years, put some policy parameters and guidelines behind that. That work has started now. I didn't talk at all about federal funding cuts. Obviously, it's an area of concern for both our budget as well as your budget. We have less that we don't have a lot that we rely upon to support operating expenses. I know it's a little bit different for the school budgets, but where we expect to see that impact is more likely on state aid, how the state budget responds, and what they're able to fund and not fund, as well as likely declining grant opportunities. One of them is a small grant, the Community Compact Grant Program, which is a great program. You generally got like $50,000, so it wasn't big dollars, but it was a very easy, accessible grant for cities and towns to take advantage of. I think it was only budgeted at $2 million a year in the state budget. It didn't get any funding for fiscal 26. So it's a very small example, but it just goes to show as the state tightens its budget, it has these downstream effects on grant programs elsewhere. Healthcare, we talked about. And then debt service, I spoke about broadly. We're trying to work on our debt service schedule. Like I said, it contemplates a significant increase in 27 and 28 already worked into the forecast. And it's driven because a number of our larger, more expensive projects are all going to end up happening at the same time, and they didn't get phased like we normally would expect them to be. The Lower Guile Turf Field project we talked about endlessly. That has, and a hearing today at the Office of Appeals and Dispute Resolution with Mass DEP for the abutter appeal. So the hearing will be finished today, then there'll be post-hearing briefs, and then a decision is expected sometime. No real timeline on that.
Timeline.
So in theory, that may not even, and we're optimistic it should take place next year. And that's a $2.4 million project now that we're spending in summer 26, fall 26 potentially. That if that order doesn't come out to the town's benefit in a timely manner, we may lose another construction season. Now we're pushing that back again. A ladder truck for $1.6 million that was approved in June of 22. It's expected to arrive in the spring of 26. So again, that's a 4-year lag from when it was ordered to arrival. A new engine, which was approved at the 2023 town meeting, about $850,000. Again, expected to arrive in the spring, 3 years after being ordered. The Cunningham Collector project was just a larger, more expensive capital project than we typically funded through the operating budget. You know, we've budgeted $5.5 million. We should be well under that. Under 4 million, we think. So that's all good news, but it's just is a larger, more expensive project than typical. And again, they're all kind of coming at the same time. So anyway, for the 27 budget, I wouldn't expect a lot of additional debt supported projects. More likely we'll lean on that free cash to support that capital budget. But I just wanted to flag service because we're going to see a spike in debt service. We typically like to see a more gradual increase. But the spike is because those budgets have been pretty flat the last couple of years. So, you know, we've avoided costs the last couple of years, but it'll catch up to us in 27, 28.
Nick, are you saying like on the trucks and the engines, we're not paying the debt service until those vehicles arrive?
So, yeah, so we appropriate the money, we sign a contract, and then we pay upon delivery.
In the Cunningham Collector project, is that the both phases? Because we'll be doing phase 2 in 26.
Yeah,
26.
so we expect to borrow that fully next fall after completion. We typically borrow August, September.
Yeah.
So we should be,
So that's
not necessarily completely closed out, but knowing exactly what the budget should look. So again, we will be under budget based on the $5.5 million appropriation, which is great. Well under, but that's just kind of the overall takeaway.
Great.
Questions, folks?
Can you just quantify? So you plan for a 7% increase in health insurance. I don't know what that is just in dollars, but let's assume it's double. Like what is that actually?
So I think, so it's 125 grand-ish per 1%. So that would be maybe 800 grand and now another 800,000.
What is your renewal timeline? You're not on a calendar year renewal, are you?
Fiscal year. So every July 1 it's coming.
Okay, so you won't really have this information until February, March.
Yeah, typically we land on our premium increase by the beginning of March, generally.
Yeah, it's always one of the
Last
things
things that come in.
for the budget. Because we're always trying to look at the most recent actuals.
Yeah, so I'd say March. Expect that if the town is going to consider and talk about plan design changes, that process would have to start sooner. And there would be some savings in the first year, under the plan design change rule, a quarter of your savings in year 1 have to be returned to the employees, so it's not, you know, you're not gonna, if you can save 3%, it's not necessarily 3%. That has to be shared.
Nick, you're negotiating with your unions right now, just like we are right now.
All our contracts are up and expired.
So would it with the larger strategic value of not taking that issue up during a negotiation, it'd be something that would be thoughtful about? Well,
I think so, and what I think where we're at right now is really just wanted to share information about health insurance before we even contemplate
Yeah.
anything like that. So I think we're just trying to get it out there
Yeah.
that we came off a tough year. we're not seeing anything that's gonna say it's gonna be an easier year, and just being upfront about that.
Yeah.
And the other piece is plan design. Because there are limitations on how much of a design change the town can make. What are those savings actually going to be? You know, like I said, we're at 400, 800 deductible. The GIC is 500,000, so it's a little bit higher, but it's not significant, so.
Right.
Working with our consultant to get a sense of what those savings might be is a conversation we haven't had yet, but something we may have to.
So, big picture takeaway is, first of all, thank you for all this really detailed information. That's really helpful. And, when you showed that slide of, if, looking at the expenses from a percentage increase versus what they actually are, is that slide basically saying absent health insurance, if we all skate in our lane for next year budgeting wise, that we all relatively have a healthy budget to a number that we can enter into that's within the fiscal revenue projections?
Yes, but it assumes usage of the operating budget stabilization fund of about $1 million. So if we're going to, no, not $1 million, maybe 800,000. So the way we set up the budget again, and when we talked about the override, was contemplated drawing down that stabilization fund. So the first withdrawal would take place in 27. If we hit these numbers, we would have to withdraw about $800,000 to $900,000 of it in year one.
There's 2.5 million.
There's 2.7 in it currently, and every year another 700,000.
If we hit these numbers, these percentage increases, that's assuming that we're using 800,000.
Yeah.
And so the 2.9% revenue increase from last year to this year,
From this year to next.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
yes, from this year to next year, it would then be 800,000 on top of it to match these expense projections.
Correct.
Okay. And then that is operating under the assumption that we haven't done anything with the free cash that was just recently certified,
Also
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't contemplate any use of free cash. Our expenses don't include any capital. So it's not like there's $1 million in capital in here that's not funded. It's not a problem.
Mhm. So there is potential though that because there is free cash, that free cash could potentially be put into the operating budget stabilization account.
One question on it, because we're adding, you said 700,000 to the operating budget stabilization on an annual basis. Take out 800,000, so really the delta within this scenario is minus current school.
And the only other component of the fiscal 26 revenue budget that's not set is our final due growth. So like I said, it's been preliminary approved by Department of Revenue. Our budget assumes $1 million. We're gonna be over that. Last year was 1.29. We're gonna be over that. So that new growth number, and I'm being reluctant to talk about it more explicitly because the Board of Assessors will talk about it at their meeting on Monday. That's all additional new revenue to the budget in 26. So that then carries forward into 27. So if it's $300,000 now, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters anymore, but in theory, if it's $300,000 over budget, then that means there's $300,000 additional in fiscal 27 to use. That's not contemplated right now in this scenario. And then that operating budget stabilization fund withdrawal is less. Obviously, that'll all be by health insurance in the worst case scenario, but that's just an example of how that would play out.
And so realistically, that health insurance, so this is just the projection that was originally built in, but realistically, knowing what we know now about health insurance, are we saying that percentage this year it was 14, right?
Yep.
So,
That could go up by another, that was at $800,000.
Yeah.
It could be, yeah. And we haven't put a number on it yet. We haven't
right,
nailed down what we think conservative forecast for that should be. I think we're starting to think it should be at 14% for now, and hopefully it'll be less than that. But in order to start high and ratchet back down. That might be where it's like in this first kind of reiteration of the forecast.
I agree with that. 14% is low, honestly, place are saying 20-30%. That's crazy, yeah, it's crazy, especially if you're not doing it, friends, Yankees to try to do stuff.
So Nick, are you approaching your budget season this year with a, with your department heads where you would generally say, we're moving everybody, we're rolling everything over, and then tightening it up from there to match this kind of forecasting for expenses?
Yeah, we have not stipulated, we've asked departments to return what they think their 27 budget will cost them. And then we'll put it together and try to hit our metrics from there. Rather than have individual departments try to fall in under these parameters. We're saying, give us your corporate requests for 27, and then our job is to, as a whole, come in on budget.
But in general, we're telling them, go over your personnel. And don't add new people. Like,
Right.
no supplemental request, but we call it like a level service plus contractual
Yeah,
increases.
yeah. That makes sense.
And that includes positions.
They're not being filled this year.
But then they move over.
Right, but if they were.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, if they're vacant today, but
Yes.
funded, all funded positions remain in terms of the initial budget request.
So roll everybody over, you have FTE wise, no adds to FTEs, and just assume contractual obligations. Okay. Thank you.
And maybe continue to talk about the things that we feel we need that we can't afford. Just so that those
We
things
don't
are
lose-
understood.
Yeah, we don't lose sight of them.
Be mindful of the time. Any other questions for our guests?
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Of course, anytime. Sorry, I wasn't coming. Optimism, but I think
I'm
Next
very
year.
content with that kind of budgeting. I appreciate the conservative approach to revenue and the thoughtful stabilization of the operating support, and I think it's really great.
Oh, yeah, you guys are doing, like, if you take health insurance out of the equation, like, it's not a bad report, and
Mhm.
health care is in a crisis. This country doesn't have anything to do with most of it.
Right.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, we can't solve it on our own, that's for sure. So it's really about shifting costs rather than trying to buck anything nationally. And obviously, the federal stuff will have a cascading effect on the health insurance market even more so than in just in this year, unfortunately.
They just lit up a whole bunch of Department of Education folks. It hasn't even hit the front page yet because there's other things on the front page. It's just- What's that?
It's in my.
It's in your front page, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's,
So
Yeah.
that should be a variable we should be thought of. for sure.
absolutely.
Thank you all
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. No, we're at time. I would like to jump down to just coordination with the warrant committee. So the question is, when do we want to meet to come on the budget 101 presentation and a full warrant committee? And meet in the evenings, 7 o'clock. We've talked about we were not able to do it the week of the 28th because the 27th because of town meeting. Next week, y'all are going to select board, and so that was off the table, so the conversation with warrant committee was the week of the 3rd. Obviously, have school committee on the 5th, that was their preference was the 5th. So, school committee, so I guess the question is, available the 3rd or the 4th, or is there a reason we really want to push for the next week? I think the warrant committee's preference, official text with the chairs for 3rd.
The fourth is town election, so.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't realize that. So we have school committee on 5. So you want to go with it? Katie has a radio schedule.
That's fine.
John Fallon's birthday,
Is that your birthday?
45, just making it all work at a young age here.
Bring cake.
Uh,
Yeah. Really,
Okay, I will move back to them and tell them the third, November 3rd. Email Charlie as well. That's okay for them. Great. Um. Again, we are at time, as I was worried we would. I know you put in the folder the updated budget philosophy. Priorities. Anything kind of briefly you want to hit on this?
I did, yeah, sure. I took your feedback related to ensuring a long-term sustainability component. So we started with that in the narrative and the philosophy at the beginning of that section. And then we added a priority number 1 for the sustainability piece. I want to thank Katie for some more good shifts for that. We did again show this to the leadership team as an example of how we're approaching the budget. This is something that can be continually provided with edits from this group. Certainly open to that. The goal again is just to with the budget season coming, let people know what we're trying to do and why, and give examples, just so we can provide directionality before we get to the numbers pieces of it. So I think it reinforces the we need to be good stewards of the financial work that we do, and it puts that as a priority, and then it allows us to go into our teaching and learning as well.
Would this then be shared with, the budget coordination committee?
We could certainly do that.
That would, I mean, just sort of as a. So I think it's sort of, it feels like it comes out in a very positive way of some of the discussions that we had at the end of the school year last year with like coming out of town meeting, sort of best practices. It just might be something that kind of wraps the discussion. I don't know, might be helpful.
So we're with them this Friday. This has not gone to the full committee, so I
Right,
could
but
email to everybody today to say this is something that we're just in terms of the document.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda for Friday on the budget coordination committee, but to the point like it's. I think
At some
after we
point, it
share,
might be-
yeah.
yeah.
It's when next Wednesday, the full school committee, we can
Okay,
share it out and say here's or documents.
Great.
Should be feedback.
And I think we were, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with all the budget documentation and budget reporting, we are trying to share that on the district website as well, as just kind of like a one place. That has kind of like all the information, one localized place with all the information, so I think. Just having that as kind of like our landing page for everything that we're working on that we've shared internally here and then at the full school committee. Just as an access point that people can just feel free to go there. See what.
so you saying, Katie, and I will agree with you, if this is what you mean, it'd be nice to have a place where we could always put that committee to say it's right up there too.
Yeah, so-
You know, so we're
Yeah.
posting it there in advance and even giving it to them.
Mhm.
Because as long as it goes through our sub-finance and our school committee, and everybody has eyes on it, then we can continue to post things. And it's just a layer of transparency that I think helps with that group.
Yeah, and we did highlight, I mean, we shared the calendar, which
Yeah.
lays out the part of our processes, establishing each member, so that's great. I do want to be mindful of time. I think we'll have time next Wednesday to chat about this a little bit further if members want to review it, and any final questions. With feedback before, then we can talk about this on the school committee agenda for 10/22. And then next week, we'll also do the quarter 1 board groups. Check it out. Anything else we need to cover for next Wednesday? Okay, and then the 29th is the discussion for revolving accounts. Great. We can talk next week too about future meeting dates in November.
The 29th. That's just the Wednesday or the meeting prior to the warrant committee. So would that be a good time to maybe share like the presentation that we're gonna present the warrant committee, so this committee can see.
That's a good point. Anything else? All right, meeting minutes, Charlene is poking me on those, so I need to get those together. I was hoping I could just do it during town meeting, but I might need to do those sooner. So I will work on those. That's it for today. So unless there's anything else, I will make a motion to adjourn.
So.
Second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.